to apply these skills. And so we'll have an introduction around the panel and some of the people on this this discussion. But I'll kick it over to Roger to tee up how today will go.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brett. I appreciate it, and welcome everyone. Want to thank our panelists for joining us. You'll be introduced to them very shortly, but just a couple housekeeping things. Just make sure microphones are on mute. We will be saving time for questions for the panelists at the end, but you can use the chat box throughout the panel to ask questions, and Brett and I will make sure we get to as many as we can. And obviously, if there's more and your questions weren't answered, feel free at the end to try to reach out to us, and we'll try to get it to the panelists to get those answers for you guys. So with that, let's kick it off. And I'll actually start with the introductions. Well, my name is Roger Jones. I work for Fox Sports and Georgetown, specifically in the athletic department. I'm the director of corporate partnerships. And basically what that is I sell sponsorship. I sell sponsorship for Georgetown Athletics. And, I reach out to brands locally in the DC and regionally in Maryland and Virginia to help move their brand forward. So how I got here, just like my colleague Brett Bauer, I went to Ohio University. I learned all my skills and trades there, and I was fortunate enough to intern with IMG in the corporate partnership world and grow my career from there. I've been doing this for about 8 years. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio, so go Browns, 4-1 Browns. And that's about it. So I'm going to pass on to Brett to make an introduction, and then we'll introduce our panelists.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. Brett Bauer with Monumental Sports and Entertainment. So we are the parent company, best known for the Washington Capitals, the Washington Wizards, and the Washington Mystics, along with Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C. So I've been with Monumental for about a year, and before that, spent 3 years with the hockey team in Pittsburgh. So I've been around the NHL for 4 or 5 seasons now, and went to, as Roger mentioned, OU for grad school and University of Wisconsin for undergrad. But I am not the focus on this, so we'll pass it over to Danielle. I would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, everyone. My name is Danielle Padovano. I am a operations manager at Home Team Sports, which is a division of Fox Sports. At Home Team Sports, we are the national sales arm for the regional sports networks. So essentially representing every NBA, NHL, and MLB team in their local market. In my role, I serve as essentially chief of staff. So working with our executive team and our executive vice president to make sure that our employees and our partners are satisfied. And, my main pillars that I work under is from an employee development perspective, which has obviously been important for us, especially during these difficult times. And also from making sure we're maintaining our relationships with our partners from a communication standpoint, from a workflow standpoint. So definitely a wide variety of different responsibilities, but I've been here for a little over 3 years. I love it. I started at Fordham University. I'm originally from South Brunswick, New Jersey, but went to Fordham. I was a basketball player there. Had a really great experience within the athletic department, within my major in communications, which eventually led through many connections to Home Team Sports. So that's a little brief introduction, and looking forward to be here.
Awesome. John, you're up next, buddy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to Sports Biz for inviting me today. Excited to be here. I am a colleague with Brett at Monumental Sports, and you can see our numerous brands all behind me. I decided to make it a red day, as you can tell. I work on our people and culture team, which is human resources. I'm the vice president of people and culture. I've been with the organization now coming up on 9 years in February. So I'll tell you, working in sports, time goes by fast. Unlike some people who may be here today, I didn't grow up with this sort of desire to work in sports. I thought I was a poli-sci major undergrad, so I thought I was going to move to DC and work in politics. But I found a niche in HR, and that is what brought me to sports. In my current role, I help oversee our payroll, our benefits, our employee life cycle, so talent acquisition. And so I look forward to engaging with you all to help you best position yourselves for whatever futures you see yourself or whatever you might learn today that sparks some interest for you. So excited to be here and to answer your questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Danielle. And to get back into this, so this is the third part of a 5-part series. The last part talked about identifying skills. You're on campus, whether you're in sports or not, trying to identify ways and opportunities. And this one's really getting to, how do I apply the skills? How do I start learning the things and taking the things I'm learning into the hands-on experiences? And what does that process looks like? So we'll kind of go through that step by step. And first, I want to start with you, John, because you mentioned something in your opening. You found a niche in human resources and people and culture and in development of people and policies and practices. Walk us through, how did you understand that niche? How did you identify it? And then how did you grow it during your college experience that ultimately led to opportunities within the sports hub?
Okay. And so help me level set really quick, Brett. Our audience is comprised primarily of high school or college or a mix?
The mix, I would say. I would probably say college based upon where we are in the webinar, but this will be rebroadcasted to high school and college, but yeah.
Perfect. So I just want to make sure I'm giving right where I'm going to start from. So how I fell into, I fell into HR. So when I look at my high school experience, I was the student that was always involved in student council. And so that position is one that you always kind of know what's happening. You have access. You're sort of a gatekeeper to information, with either sharing it down to your peers or reporting it up to the administration. When I got to college, still maintain some of those similar type roles of sort of being in the know. And that's what I think HR represents for me when I look at how I was able to have some transferable skills that put me in this HR bucket, being in the know. So in high school, I went to college, poli-sci major, great, did a couple internships. Well, actually, I would say my college experience was somewhat unique. I worked in our admissions office the summer after my freshman year. So that is technically recruiting, which falls into HR. So I was making calls to students, telling them about, I went to Furman University undergrad, really promoting that brand and trying to get them to accept offers or getting campus tours. I was an expert at walking backwards as I guided those tours. And then I did a program where I worked with students who came from, how would I say it? Whose potential outdistanced their current circumstances. So it was a program called Bridges to a Brighter Future. And so every summer I worked with that group. And so that was sort of coaching and professional development. And so not even realizing what I had sort of set myself up for, I had already been putting some skills in place to help me excel in the field of HR. In undergrad, I did an internship in DC with my poli-sci major, working for a PR firm that had a lot of political clients. And so that was where I was saying, like, okay, graduate, I'm moving to DC. I moved to DC. I finished undergrad in 2009. And if you recall, the economy was bad. So that was a tough time. So I moved without a job. I said, I'm just going to step out there on faith. In that process, I did a lot of networking. You'll probably hear a lot of people talk about how did they get these current opportunities. It was through networking and trying to build relationships. So I would say I took a unique path in getting to sports, but my first opportunity to work full time actually ended up being in human resources. And so that's where I say I sort of fell in it, because I had all intentions of sort of landing this job on Capitol Hill. Started human resources with Hyatt. And then after being there for 2.5 years, I applied to this company called Monumental Sports and Entertainment, honestly, because they had an HR manager role, not even concerned about the glitz and glamour of it, but just HR job, let me apply for it. And that is how I landed into sports. So I will tell you this, Whoever you see that has a position that you are looking to possibly achieve one day, go to their LinkedIn, look at how they navigated to that story, because everyone here probably took a different route in getting to sports. So I say take advantage of that. I do think a lot of times when working in sports, having some previous sports experience is great, but that can come in numerous ways. So I'll pause there and allow others to chime in, but that was sort of my path, and it's probably not traditional to some people who knew, out of high school, I want to work in professional sports.
Well, John, I don't think there is a traditional route to working in sports all the time, but I think you're a great example that you identified opportunities that were on campus that you mentioned that didn't involve in sports, recruitment, admissions, these programs that you were with, and you were able to identify what transferable skills you had and interests that went into your career path that led you into sports, right? I think that's an important distinction. So there are definitely sports internships and hands-on experience that we'll talk about from a volunteer standpoint. But just as important, identifying ways to build your skill set that you can take into the business function of the sports world that you want to be: marketing, human resource, sponsorship, sales, ticket sales. I think that's an important piece. Danielle, is there anything you'd like to add on that piece?
Yeah, I would just say that when in preparing for this, I had actually come to a similar realization that, for me, it was I had accepted a position at Home Team Sports right out of college. It was actually fairly an administrative position. So I was still in a realm of, I knew I wanted to be in sports. I knew I had a passion for sports, obviously being an athlete, a former student athlete. But, kind of similar to John's point, I knew that I had a passion for working with teams. I knew I had a passion for, understanding and figuring out how to best motivate myself, motivate my teams. And so that's something that over the course of, thankfully the role that I did end up taking, it has continued to evolve from there. And I've been able to apply a lot of the skill sets that just come natural to me and are things that I love and I enjoy. And I think working for an organization where I've been able to evolve that role and really, take and hone a lot of those similar skills and passions that I have has been, something that I've learned. I wouldn't say when I graduated that I necessarily knew I wanted to be in the role that I'm in today. But it's been pretty cool to realize that over time, there are certain things that come naturally to you, and embrace them. And whatever that are, it can be numerous different things, but it's definitely something I've learned over the last couple of years.
Well, Danielle, you and John both talked about, really identifying your niche and interest very early, in your careers. Can you speak on, for some of our attendees, who might struggle with finding what that is, what's the best way to look for opportunities and sort of get that sort of their foot wet, and to see if they might be interested in something like sports or like HR, or other different departments?
I can chime in there. I think it's important to sort of, as you mentioned, Roger, find out what makes you happy, what makes work not feel like work. And as a student, you're in a prime space to pivot, try different things. I think in sports, we drive a lot about internships, and internships can be highly competitive. And I also think you want to be strategic of when you land that internship with a professional sports team. I always sort of say summer after freshman year could be great, but you have another 3 years of school to finish. And so there's a lot of distance between the time you'd actually be looking for full-time work. So I sort of say start smaller, but try to get that professional internship summer after your junior year, or maybe summer after you've recently graduated, so that you can immediately say, hey, I'm ready for full-time work. I also think another opportunity to test things out, look for part-time employment. We hire tons of game night staff. 30 internship spots, 500 part-time positions. Look at it. There's a greater opportunity that you would get a part-time position, which now has opened the door for you. You can see a Brett walk in the concourse. You can see a Danielle. You can see a Roger. You can spark up them and then have small conversations, start building that rapport. And they're like, you know what? Met this, this part-timer. They are sharp. They're talking about the experience. Hey, I want to let you know we have an internship coming up. You should apply. I'll definitely can forward your information along. So use those opportunities. I think cast a wider net is what I'm essentially saying. Internships are great, but there are tons of part-time opportunities that can get your foot in the door and allow you to just sort of see from the inside perspective. So I would say take advantage of that as you're looking for opportunities, but also try things outside of sports. If you have an interest in maybe working with people, professional development, find some internships related to people, to HR. If you like marketing, marketing is a function of every organization. It doesn't just have to be in sports. Even our colleagues that work in sports, I share with them, sports isn't the only career that you can, only industry you can work in. You can stretch yourself and grow. And sometimes, and I think everyone here would understand, when we're recruiting for people to come to sports, it's refreshing to see someone who comes from a different industry because they're able to bring in a whole different perspective. Because a lot of times in sports, everyone's only kind of worked in sports. So you have this limited scope or limited view sometimes, not always, but that's just what you know. But then if we hire someone who came from a larger corporate 500, maybe a tech company, they may come in and say, hey, well, we were doing this and we didn't even think about it. So now that allows us to grow our business. So I say use your undergrad experience to pivot, to try different things, do internships. Also, don't forget to look on your college campus. There's always a manager of the team. There's always a ticket taker at the event. And those are ways you can just get the inside scoop, inside perspective and figure out, hey, do I like this? Or did I dread going to, do ticket sales at the collegiate level? So think about it from that perspective.
Yeah, I would even build onto that from a more general perspective. I think I, in school, probably took for granted the amount of opportunities that I did have that weren't the traditional internship or weren't the traditional job or role or function within athletics or the school. And, there were probably opportunities that I was given different projects in the business school. And do I look at that and say, okay, I'm going to take this opportunity to look at a different category or a different business that maybe I might be interested in. And so then you get an inside scoop. You can spend a period of time really delving into different industries, different specific companies to find out, maybe you do at the end of the day like what they're doing, or there's a really fascinating idea or fact about that company that is of interest to you. There's ways that are beyond the traditional, what we all think of. You have to get that internship. You have to have that on your resume. I think in everyday life, everyone you meet on campus, every person in development, they have connections to different alumni who are probably in roles that you would eventually want to be in one day. So take every experience that you have. I know it sounds a little overwhelming when you want to just enjoy college and have fun and, have fun with your friends. But I think a really cool way to look at it too is that everything's an opportunity. And if you can pull a professor aside and maybe ask them a deeper question about something you learned in class, and they can connect you with someone who they know through former alumni, that's a really good opportunity to make a natural connection and to really, at the end of the day, having an understanding of how businesses work in general is always helpful, whatever role or whatever department you find yourself in. And so I think if that is taking maybe take a part-time or a full-time job in the summer instead of an internship, it's still valuable. You're still developing skills. You're still growing as a professional and even personally. So I think that's a really good thing to remember. If it doesn't look like it's a formal traditional internship, there are many other opportunities that will help you get to the place that you want to be.
Yeah, I think you hit on something really important, Danielle, on non-traditional, and John, you too, on non-traditional different ways, and even your schoolwork in your non-sports class. For those that are in sports classes, for those that are in non-sports classes, you're in marketing, you're in human resource, you're in finance, and you're doing projects, you're doing papers. How can you work those subjects and layer sports on top of it? I think back to an international project that I was tasked to do about a certain topic, and I chose to do it on the NFL expansion in Europe from an international standpoint. So I layered sports on top of the project that I wanted to do, and that helped me gain and understand the industry just a little bit better. So whether you're exploring, I think, or whether you're going to be working in sports, and both of you guys have both said college, it's about exploring and pivoting and trying to understand, but just be very deliberate, I think, with your actions. Have a plan, at least a sense of a plan of what you're doing is what I'm hearing both of you say, and working on and finding the skills and niche that you guys want to develop and potentially be in. So I think that's a really key point to this. And so now I want to transition a little bit. We did talk about internships, and both Danielle and John, you are very heavily involved in the internship programs. Some would say John, you're the master of our internship program and the overseeing director of it all. But let's talk about internships as resumes are coming, as applications, as you're speaking with potential interns. So this is before anybody is even an intern. What stands out to you? What should they know as they're applying and looking for internships with the professional team, with the college team, with the agency, those types of things? What's really sticking out to you in their story, in the way they present themselves, even in their resumes? We'd love to hear some tips on that. And Danielle, I want to start with you.
I was gonna say, I want to hear what John has to say. I mean, I think, from having conversations with folks, we know that anyone can come in. What we're doing isn't brain science, right? We are selling advertising, and it's exciting. It's great. I love it. Our people are so intelligent, so incredible. But at the end of the day, I think what we look for most is the people that we're bringing in, and the people that we're bringing into our environment. What are they like? And I have our values up here in my Zoom background, but curiosity is one of the ones that stands out most to me. I think all of them are important, but for us, we want, it's great to make a connection with someone that said, hey, I was reading something online and I noticed that something happened with the MLB. How does that affect your company? What does that mean? Or I feel like this might be something that, can, if there's a new category, maybe that's come out, maybe the direct to consumer, there's a really cool brand that I saw. I feel like that would be something that would work really well within your model. And so, having a conversation about it, and not necessarily saying, I have all of this experience, my resume is perfect, I've taken all of these classes, I know exactly what you're doing. But we want to bring someone in who fits in our culture and who is curious, who has drive, who is a good collaborator, who is innovative and thinks innovatively. So, I think for us, it's not as much of what's necessarily listed on the resume, but it's displaying the qualities of the type of person that we want to bring into our company, and the rest can figure itself out.
I share what Danielle has said, and I must give a shout out to my colleague Layla. She's our new leader for the internship program, and she is killing it. Look her up if you want to get in the internship with Monumental Sports. She's really leading that space. But I think in general, to echo that, resumes at the internship level, they can start to look the same. Everyone kind of has similar experience. We know that you're looking to learn and grow. I think it's really when it gets to that interview point is where you can set yourself apart. There's a couple of best practices that I tell anyone, be prepared, have questions and ask questions. I think it's also important to know, if you're granted the opportunity, you really want to come in and figure out where's the need on the team, and you make that your specialty. I'll never forget when I first started with Monumental, we had an intern that was working with our HR group, and I needed to figure out this Excel formula it was in a toggle field to sort of manipulate the final product that it would populate. And she figured it out. To this day, I still use that toggle field in the formula that she shared with me. I will never forget. And I'm like, wow, she was able to figure this out. You're great. And she was like, it's just a matter of doing some research, but she found a niche. And so I knew that I could depend on her for that expertise. So I would say, come in, be confident. I would also say leverage your network as best as you can. Working in sports is competitive. And I hate to say it, working in sports is a lot about relationships. Some of us come from various backgrounds that don't necessarily give us a leg up in that environment, but you have the power of LinkedIn on your side. What I have seen as some best practices, people will be strategic. If you go to most companies' websites, there are some email addresses that are available there. Reach out to the that are most aligned with the opportunity you're looking for. I say most aligned because we've also had some people that have applied and emailed every email address that was on the website. So let me tell you what that looks like. So you applied for an HR position, but now I have everyone in the company forwarding me your email and saying, hey, got this. I don't think they meant to send it to me. I'm sending it to you. So now I have 50 people and they're like, they applied for an HR internship. I don't even know why they emailed me. So be strategic in that, because you want to make sure you're setting a good, good first impression. And I think that's just a matter of using good judgment and working smart. So be strategic. And I think another way to set yourself apart is to try to get some informational interviews lined up. So you can start doing that prior to your readiness to apply for that internship. So you can have a connection with Brett or Danielle or Roger before you even applied for anything. So then you apply, guess what? You can say, hey, Roger, I just want to let you know that I applied for this opportunity with Georgetown. Just want to keep you abreast of what's happening in my area. Do you happen to know the hiring manager? Would you mind putting in a good word for me or sharing my information? Those are all things things that help you set yourself apart. I do feel that to work or get an internship in sports, you cannot be passive. You need to figure out, how am I going to make contacts with people? How am I going to be genuine in this approach? But how am I going to help myself? You can't just apply and say, oh, I'm just going to sit and wait. Because when you do that, there's someone else that has connected with other people, and they have other people reaching out to that hiring manager. Or guess what? You don't know someone that works there. Figure out who those people are in that department, send them a LinkedIn request. Hey, my name is John Ferguson. I recently applied for XYZ internship. Based on the website, looks like this will fall under your scope. I would love the opportunity to have an informational chat with you just to learn more about your experience and the opportunity. There you have it. Also, if you send those emails, the key there is to make sure you follow up. You have to follow up. Everyone here wants to help, but we also have 1,000 emails that come in a day. And so I think, and I know for a fact, some of our sales managers who are hiring managers, they wait for that follow-up. Because guess what? To work in sales, you're going to have to be persistent. So if you just send that one email and you sort of never got the response, not that they didn't want to respond to you, but they're trying to see what is your natural response to not getting a response. So you got to apply some pressure there. Just say, hey, checking back in. One funny story there, we had when I first started at Monumental, there was a young woman that we had working on our sales team, and the hiring manager, like, I'll never forget when she applied. She emailed him after maybe, I don't know, she got his email, but she would email him essentially every day. Now, this was a unique approach. I don't know if it would work for everybody, but it worked for her. She started saying, happy Monday, this is X, checking back in. I'd love to, connect with you. Happy Tuesday. And so she just kept doing it. He's like, look, she is so persistent. She's got to work in sales. So that worked for her. Figure out how to set yourself apart. Always be professional and do what works for you. If that's not natural for you to take that approach, don't do that. But those are some things that I would say to help set yourself apart. Again, you can't be passive. And I think the social side of things is where you can really set yourself apart. Now, that may be a challenge if you are an introvert, and that's okay. Set up those one-on-one opportunities so that it can be easier for you to lead or guide that conversation. And guess what? As an introvert, you're probably like, I just want to sit and listen. So have those questions prepared. Best question to say is, tell me, how did you get to where you are? Now you can just sit back and take notes because people are always happy to share that experience and how they navigated it.
John, I love that. I mean, I think, for me, what you're really saying is be authentic, right? Be your authentic self. And the reason why you want to do that, especially at this age, as a young college student or even high school student, you want to be comfortable, right? And as John, this, Danielle, this. You guys have interviewed so many folks. Brett, you know as well. You can tell when people are uncomfortable, right? You can read body language and you can read the confidence, and that shows, when you're in an interview process. And what I want, John, you talked about this being prepared, and I know our students and our people in the audience have heard this. You got to be prepared. You got to make sure your resume is right. You got to have questions. But what specifically, John, when someone's sitting across the table from you, and Danielle, when someone's sitting across the table from you as well, what says to you this person's really prepared versus this person, they probably should have spent a little bit more time doing research or preparing for this meeting? What are those cues that you look for?
A quick reference point is when I ask them. Generally, if we're doing an interview and we're some casual talk in the beginning, you should also have small talk. So whenever you get to a place for an interview, whoever you encounter, you're interviewing. Because a receptionist can make or break a whole lot. Because I would generally ask, how was Brett in the lobby? Did he speak to you? Was he engaged? Did he not say anything? Then you have that long walk back to the interview space. Talk about the weather. Talk about traffic. Just small talk. Because that helps you to sort of get it comfortable in that space. It also helps the interviewer because they're 9 times out of 10 either running late or they haven't had a chance to prepare as much as they want, or they may be nervous as well. So I say do that. But typically on a phone screen, if I am getting a feeling that the person is not prepared, the next question I'm going to ask is, what do you know about Monumental Sports and Entertainment? And that's where I can catch it. Because they're like, oh, well, you do sports and you do entertainment. So that's when I'm 9 times out of 10 going to go ahead and sort of move to closing this process out because you have demonstrated that you are not aware. I think one thing that you should do to be prepared for an interview, Google the company and hit the news tab on Google. See what's happening in the news. See what's current for them because that lets me know, wow, you've done some research. because 9 times out of 10, when they kick it off with like current details or something, I'm like, oh, okay. So now I know I don't have to ask you, what do you know about monumental sports? Because that's not a default question, because I'm assuming you've applied, you already know. But if I can tell you haven't prepared, I'm going to kind of take it there just to see where we are in the process. And I also think have a cheat sheet. You should go in with a binder of sorts. Have your resume, but have a cheat sheet. Know what you want the interviewer to know about you, no matter what question they ask. I also think it's good to practice. You won't believe how your nerves can get the best of you, but if you practice a couple, I would say just canned responses. Tell me about your strengths. Why do you want to work here? What value can you bring to the team? Those are general questions that will be asked in an initial screen. So be prepared for that. But I think having that list of what you know you want to say, no matter what questions they ask, prevents you from being in a position of, oh, I forgot to tell Danielle about this experience, and that was like perfectly in line here. Because you can always incorporate it no matter what question they ask. You can say, in addition to that, I want to share with you this. Then next, I always talk about you have to have your Beyonce fan. So this goes back to helping you set yourself apart. Who has seen Beyonce perform either in person or in a video? If you could put yes in the chat so we can see who's there. I don't know who's out there, but put yes in the chat. So she always has this fan blowing on her. So I think about that. When you come into an interview, what fan are you bringing? What is blowing on you? Because that's unique to sort of her style of performing. What is your tangible? So Brett talked about he did a project in grad school and he related it to sports. He could bring that in and show where he did this case analysis. Other people, if they want to be a graphic designer or graphic design intern, you have to bring in some work samples. I mean, that's part of it. So those students that are prepared, bringing in documents to show what I can do. It can be writing samples. Just having that piece can separate you from the pack. And allows for you to just showcase your skills and abilities and what you can bring to the team.
And John, really quick, Danielle, before we jump to you, how important or not important when you're talking about how you know the company are the on-field stats, the on-ice performance, and coming in and spewing those out? Are they important? Are they not important? How would you categorize, I know every player on the Mystics versus, hey, I know what's going on in the business world? How does that play in?
I think you should have a happy hybrid there. You want to have a mix of information. One thing I will caution, you do not want to come across as a super fan when applying to work in sports. We pay attention to your email address, Washington Wizards, #1 fan, superfan@gmail.com. Like, we're kind of raising our eye. Like, are they getting here just so they can get the autograph from John Wall the first time they see him? Or are they coming here because they want to learn, grow, and be in the environment? So that is something you want to be mindful of. I know when I was going in for my interview, and I'm in general a very casual sports fan, but I was wondering, like, am I not intense enough? Should I say, like, yes, the Wizards are my favorite team ever? So I struck a balance, because you don't want to come across as a fan. You want to come across a person that's excited about joining the organization and helping to impact the bottom line and drive the business forward. So I think some of the on-field stats are great, but also have some information about what's going on in the business.
I want to emphasize a point that John made earlier on when you do have those, if going through your resume and practicing your elevator pitch and some of the key takeaways that you're looking for the prospective employer to get, say them out loud. I cannot emphasize it enough. As you're practicing in your room, say them out loud. I would consider myself in that introvert realm. So it is totally different when you're going in. Obviously, the nerves set in. And it changes your answer. But if you said it out loud already, if you've practiced that, if you've gotten comfortable with how you're saying it, I think it makes a complete difference. So it's definitely something, looking back, I wish I would have done a little bit more. But I would even just add, from home team sports perspective, I think it's a little different since we're not necessarily a consumer-facing brand. We are the sales arm for the network. So everyone knows the Yes Network, everyone knows SNY, et cetera, across the country, but Home Team Sports isn't necessarily a logo that you're familiar with. So in addition to, clicking on the news tab and seeing, reading more about the company and being a little bit more familiar with where we are in the industry is critical. But I would also say that even the questions that are directed our way during that process helps me know that you've prepared, if that makes sense. if someone comes in and they may not be the most familiar, usually I give a brief overview of who we are, who we represent, the different departments that we have. And if I go through all of that and there are no questions, I get a little concerned because we are probably one of the more confusing businesses, just because, again, we're not necessarily consumer facing. But I love when there are questions. I love when, oh, that's really interesting. Can you explain a little bit more how that department interacts with this department? Or, generally, what does that relationship look like with our regional sports network? And I think that almost for me is kind of the sign of, okay, this person's listening, they're engaged. It's not a problem to ask a question, but obviously making sure that you're continuing to follow a conversation and asking poignant questions that will help them or help you, understand the business better and see how you can make the best impact.
Yeah, Danielle. Oh, sorry, Brad. I just want to follow up real quick on Danielle with the questions. I wanted, we probably have a lot of students out hear the phrase, oh, there's no such thing as a bad question. John, Danielle, is there such thing as a bad question? Is there questions that students should stay away from? And are there questions that are better than others?
I have a real world example of a bad question. This threw me for a loop. I literally had to say, hold on. I had to put the phone on hold. Like, did they really just ask that? So sometimes as you're preparing for interview, you go and you Google interview questions to ask. And so I could tell it, like, they were just running down a list because it was like, okay, this is the 15th question now. And this was an initial phone screen. So I'm like, we're touching on benefit details. Like, we don't even know if we're in the same car at this point. But I can't remember what role it was, but it was an entry level position. I know. They said, so can you tell me about your severance policy? And that really stood out to me. I had to pause for a minute. And if you're not familiar, severance is essentially when a company is separating. You and that company are separating, and sometimes it's just not working out for both parties. And there's an agreement that is reached for some things that benefit you, but just to go ahead and terminate this relationship. So they asked about it, and so that was the first time I'd ever been sort of asked about a severance policy in an initial phone screen. And so I paused, and I'm the person, I try to make everything a learning moment. So I then said, hey, we'll say the candidate's name was John. John, where did you get that question from? Because I was just looking at the cadence of the other questions. He's like, oh, well, I just, I Googled questions to ask. And so then I broke it down on what severance meant and explained it. And then I said, do you see how that can be off-putting if we're trying to build a relationship and you are now referencing something that means a relationship is being ended, it is terminating. So that be informed. Don't just Google and run down the list of questions. Make sure you know what you are asking and you know the intent behind it. I think that there's nothing wrong with being curious and asking follow-up questions to something, but make sure you're asking a question that makes sense for where you are in establishing that relationship. So that was my question of, did they really just ask that? And to that student's benefit, I think it was a great learning moment. They honestly said, I didn't even know what severance was. I was just going down the list of questions. So you want to make sure that, because then that makes, as an employer, think, well, are you a critical thinker? Are you questioning? Are you using logic? Are you using your judgment and making business decisions no matter what role you come into? Because if you say, hey, I painted the wall red because that was the only paint that was by the wall, but you were specifically asked to paint the wall gray. I don't mean to minimize painting or that as a task, but you want to say, oh, if they didn't have gray paint, let me go back and inquire about, hey, you said do this, but when I opened the gray paint can, for whatever reason, it was red. You want to question things. You want to make sure you're doing and doing it appropriately.
Great point.
John, it's funny because John interviewed me for my position at Monumental, and I have a personal philosophy being an extrovert. Like I have very curious mind, so I go in and ask a lot of questions right away. I think one time John stopped and said, "Hey, I'm supposed to be interviewing you. Like I'm asking you questions." But the questions piece, I've found and I've learned through the process that you can impress with your questions. You can come off very smart, intelligent, prepared, where you don't have to know the answers to them, obviously, but you can come out and impress with questions. Where I would do an exercise where you open up a book, a small little book, you write the left side of the questions you think everyone would ask. What's the day-to-day like? What are the responsibilities? On the right side, you put questions that you think are very unique or something that you take time to research. And those are the impressive questions that you can have. Again, very deliberate, not what's the severance, John. I love that. I love that story. But something that's that's role responsible, that has some sort of intent to it, or on the right side. You saw something in the business, in the trends. How does this impact your business? Danielle, you had mentioned something that about before. Or where have interns in the past succeeded, failed? Where have they gone on to? Things like that that are very deliberate. And now you have two sides of the questions that you can both prepare and have answers on. So I think it's a really strong point you guys both made from the question standpoint. So the one thing I wanted to touch back on really quickly was informational interviews, even before the interview process happens, and just growing your network. I think that's intimidating for a lot of students, high school and college kids. With informational interviews, maybe it is applied to interview in the future. Maybe it's we just want to grow our network at the moment we have. But thinking back to your high school and college years, and Roger, I want to open this one up to you as well. How do you approach somebody in the industry? What are some etiquette? How do you then position and sort of lead that charge? The onus, I think, is on the student to have that process and to go through it. But talk about informational interviews a little bit far more, and how you respond to students asking, hey, can I have some of your time, which is at a premium?
I would, I think we touched on it a little bit of, we are all more than happy to conduct an informational interview. I think it's great for the prospective candidate because, something that I had also learned that would probably be important for attendees to know is that whereas a lot of my peers in business school who are going into financial roles and were kind of on that scheduled cohort, I guess, period of where they would know that in December they were going to have a job at the end of the year and everything was set and they can put away their resumes and they don't have to worry about it for the next couple months. Whereas in media, it's definitely more of as opportunities arise, as there are entry-level positions, as people continue to move up in companies, wherever that falls in the year is when there are open positions. So it's not necessarily something that you can plan 6 months in advance to know that you're set by graduation at the end of the year. And so something that I think is important is these informational interviews and starting to develop a relationship with someone. I think kind of to something that I mentioned earlier is it's always best welcomed when it's a little natural. Hey, I saw this article in the news. Hey, my professor mentioned, we talked about your business or something that your business is doing. In one of my classes, I saw you on LinkedIn. I figured I'd try to make a connection that way. Alumni, those are usually ones that it's anytime someone emails me from a Fordham address, I definitely make sure to answer because, it's something that I've appreciated when I was an undergraduate. And so I think making it as warm of an introduction as possible is usually the best. It's, again, as we spoke to earlier, it's not always easy for everyone. I think we all have, different levels of folks who we know in the industry, but being able to make a LinkedIn connection and give them a shout out, the worst thing they're going to do is they're going to say no. But you put yourself out there and you put yourself in the best position to succeed, which is the most important.
Yeah, I'll just jump right in real quick, talk about networking. And my biggest piece of advice for everyone in attendance is don't view networking just as sending an email or connecting with somebody on LinkedIn once, right? And talking to them once. Networking is about building relationships, and you want to build this over time, and your relationships are going to continue to grow and grow and grow. And when you get to a certain level, you want your network to work for you, right? So whereas the people that you've networked with and connected with and built these relationships with continue to see your career grow and are invested in it. And when other opportunities happen, they're saying, hey, they're reaching out to you about a position, or they're saying, hey, I know this person. So make sure you do it strategically, very similar to how you would an interview. Research, approach them, or when you go to approach and connect with somebody, have a plan, have a strategy of how you're going to communicate with that person, know a little bit about that person and why there is a fit for you to connect with them.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, John. Go ahead, John. We just had a quick question come up from someone.
I didn't have anything to add. I echo what everyone has said here. The one thing I would say in making those connections, I think Danielle talked about it, try to figure out where there is a rhythm between reaching out or who you know in your network. Another great tool is if you get on LinkedIn, you know someone that knows that person, ask them to make an introduction for you. Because I really try to keep my LinkedIn contacts to someone that I have at least engaged with. Working in HR, I get a ton of requests. I only request people that I have an actual, met you somewhere, we met out, or a good way for me to accept it is if you personalize the connection request. Let me know what you're trying to gather from this. But if it's just a blind request, I sort of see it as spam. Like, I don't know you, you don't know me. I try to keep my relationships at least to some level of being authentic. But I can say, oh, I did meet this person at X event or that event, or we had this phone conversation. So I think continue to leverage that. And when you go in for interviews, it's also good to look up the person that you were going to interview with. I'm always sort of tickled when someone's like, oh, I see you went to Furman. Oh, I did. And I'm like, I have a friend that went to Furman. So it helps with the small talk. And now it makes me a little like, oh, okay, I feel comfortable. They feel comfortable because we had some small chatter in that process.
Yep. So we do have a couple questions from our attendees. The first question I'll shoot to both of you, and even Brett, if you want to hop in on this. It comes from PJ Yoder. The question is, the pandemic has hit the sports industry pretty hard. So opportunities seem like they're harder to come by at this moment. How should we go about attacking this obstacle, knowing that we want to end up in sports? For anyone who wants to take that question on.
I can chime in. Cast a wide net. I think we mentioned that earlier. Sports has been hit significantly by the pandemic. Many companies have stopped internship programs. Many companies have done hiring freezes, but there are a lot of companies that are still doing business and still hiring. So I would encourage you to find out, sports is the industry, but what function in sports are you interested in? And continue to try to gain experience in that function. So if that's marketing, if that's sales, if that's PR, that's communication, that's HR, those opportunities are still out there. Just cast a wider net in this time. But this is also a good time to try to brush up on some of those soft skills and do some informational interviews, start building your network, so that when things open back up, or we start being able to play with fans and we start to recover from this period, you are front of mind for some.
Danielle or Brett, do you guys have anything to add to that question? I think John hit it pretty well.
Very well.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would just add, and I've had conversations with students around similar things, and there's no silver bullet. There's nothing that we're ever going to tell you that will be, oh, this is the one spot that has all these different jobs and opportunities. So that you got to stay gritty, and you got to stay with the mental toughness attitude during this. And don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't be afraid to communicate what your goals are to others so others can help you, right? And whether they're in the industry, outside the industry, I think having a strong communication plan on what's trying to achieve is important during a time like this. And we will bounce back. The world, and specifically the sports industry, will bounce back at some point. So there will be those internships and those jobs. How are you creating your story now? So when you are 6, 12, 18 months in a position, you can look back on it and say, I maximized my time outside of sports or in these different sectors or in this and that. Now I'm ready to jump in and step in and be a contributor right away.
Yeah. James made a good point in the chat that, there are certain industries and maybe even certain sectors of the sports industry that are killing it now and are able to, take advantage of some of it, whether maybe you wanted to work in in-person events, but that's probably not necessarily someone that, or a group that's hiring at this moment, but maybe there's another aspect or a different industry that you might be able to work in. Maybe it's virtual events, maybe there are different things that you can develop skills in. And then at a certain point, you transition into maybe something that fits a little bit better. So it takes a lot of extra research and digging, to your point, Brett, but I think James said it well, and that it's a marathon, not necessarily a sprint, and getting to that final gig.
Absolutely. I think those are great advice. And we do have a second question. It comes from Kenya Jones. Kenya's question is, what are you guys' thoughts about setting up in-person visits and tours, whether that be visiting arenas and business grounds, et cetera? Obviously, with COVID, that may not be the best approach right now, but once we get back to hopefully a new normal, what are you guys' thoughts about that when an interviewee or a candidate reaches out wanting to actually be in the building or see the facilities?
Danielle, you want to take a stab at that one first?
Yeah, I think, might have a little bit varying answers just because I'm not necessarily in a traditional HR role where I'm getting numerous requests at numerous times. But I think if there is a relationship, if it was a friend of a friend who came forward and said, hey, can we grab a coffee and, get to know each other a little bit better, tell you a little bit more about myself, learn more about your company, I would say I'm probably open to that. I think that being able to catch someone in person as a candidate is awesome and probably the best position to be in, only because you can develop that personal relationship. You can have a lot of more of the small talk that we were talking about, make it definitely more of an informal, informational interview. But I think it does vary depending on the type of role. If you're going straight to HR, you've just submitted a resume online, maybe that's not necessarily the first step that you want to look for, or that employer is looking for. But I think if it is, a natural connection, a relationship that you're making and just trying to start to learn more about the industry, it's especially as a high school student or even an undergraduate college student, if you're not necessarily looking for an interview, ask someone to grab a cup of coffee, ask someone if they have a break within their day to step outside and get some fresh air. It's also different being in New York City, which is where I'm from, a little easier to do that than driving across town. But I would say from my perspective, if there is a relationship there, I think I would almost even prefer to have an in-person chat.
You can definitely, request a tour, but I think that's a request that will come into a relationship that you may have already sort of done some groundwork on. That may be hard as a cold intro. So if it's someone that you've connected with, you've done an informational, I'd love to stay in touch. A couple follow-up emails like, hey, I'm actually in town this week, or, I'm back in DC because the semester started back. I love to put a face with the name, and I've actually never been inside the arena, and to just get a glimpse of behind the scenes if you're open to it. I think that's a way in which you can set that up. And even if you're going in for an interview and then there's time, there's always the space to say, hey, I've actually never been in the arena. Could I get a chance to look at? I saw you all did a renovation. For us, that was very true before we were shut down. You have a new center hung. I'd love to see it. I've heard the stats about it, or I've seen it. I saw you done this. So you can kind of talk yourself into it. And if you were with me, I would say, yeah, let's take a walk. Actually, let's just leave the conference room and we'll do this interview kind of in a move and just kind of walk around the concourse, show you some things. Or even if I don't have time after the interview, I may ask a colleague like, hey, do you mind taking Brett? He wanted to see the arena really quickly, but that just further shows curiosity. And I think Danielle talked about that. But you can, but I think that's not the first introduction from a code standpoint. I think once you've established a cadence and a rapport, you could go in for that.
For anyone who hasn't seen Monumental's new center hung, it's awesome. I want to thank you guys for putting that in and spending that money, because my sponsors love it. So I appreciate that. And just, we're running it down on time, but want to get a couple quick hitters. What's the best way to reach people? Is it LinkedIn now? Is it via email? Is it social media? There's so many methods. What do you guys prefer to be contacted on?
LinkedIn is my preference. Just in general, send me a message on LinkedIn. If you are able to get my email address, that's great too. But I think LinkedIn, I'm more inclined to like the social chatter that can happen there. So I like using that tool. For me, that's the social media for the professional space. So that's my preference.
I'd probably say the same. Yeah. My email's online, so I usually get a lot of emails, but I think LinkedIn is a great opportunity as well.
Right. You prefer IG, right? Or is it TikTok? I forget nowadays. TikTok. Well, that's great. And I think you guys both hit on this. And just to wrap it up, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat box, but just wrap it up. And you guys hit on the social piece of it, right? Especially initially. Do you prefer someone come, especially if they reach out on LinkedIn, have a social, get to know them a little bit before, we start diving into professionalism of it all? Or do you want to go right to business? I mean, what is a better method that you guys receive a little bit better and makes you open up to that individual?
I think it's a balance.
Yeah.
You want to be able to find a way to make it feel natural from a cold introduction, but you should be driving that if you're reaching out to me. But I also think, in that initial, when you personalize that message, you only have so many words. So I see a lot of the salespeople are really good at maximizing what they're trying to get across there. So look at how people have either approached you. Some folks say, I see we have a lot of people in common. That's fine, but I still don't know you. So I see we have some mutual connections, and I have applied for opportunity with Miami Middle Sports. I'd love to talk with you about your experience there, or I'd love to learn a little bit more about the organization. So sort of add more than that, us having mutual connections, or if you're going to go that route, say, hey, we have a mutual connection, Brett, and then talking to him about some opportunities in Miami Middle Sports, he suggested that I reach out to you. So sort of name drop if you can. But know that I probably will go back to Brett and say, who'd you give my information to? Or how did you find me out? So if you look me up on LinkedIn as John Ferguson with Miami Middle Sports, please personalize the request and just say, hey, I was on part of the panel or attendee at the panel today. I love to get connected to your network and continue to stay in touch. So I guarantee you I will accept that. But if you just send the cold request, I have no idea that we met in this engagement.
That's a great point. I would agree with it all.
So final question, we talked about a lot today. We talked starting at identifying skills, niche, interest, how to get experience, whether it's your schoolwork, hands-on experience, volunteer, internships, part-time, how to look for opportunities. What's the big takeaway? What's one main perspective that you're hoping students learn from this based on all the things that we talked about today in 30 or 45 seconds or less? But what's the one point you really both want to, all three of you, Roger, I want to include you want to drill home?
Closed mouths don't get fed. So speak up, be active, be confident. No one's a mind reader, and you don't get in a position of wanting to point fingers at everyone else. Start with yourself.
Love it.
I'll go, Danielle, just real quick. I think John said it multiple times. Cast a wide net. There's a saying, fish where the fish are, but I mean, don't limit yourself. Don't limit your opportunities. Cast a wide net.
I'm going to also share a quote that I used to have hung up in my office when offices were a thing. It is, attitude is the difference between an ordeal and an adventure. And I think a lot of us can probably speak to the fact that our careers to this point have been an adventure. And while not necessarily always charted out in advance, look at the different opportunities that you have, look at the different situations that you're in, and choose to learn from them, choose to get better from them, to develop as better person, better professional, and, you can continue to grow from there.
Danielle, can you say that one more time? I was writing it down, but I want to make sure I have it exactly.
It's attitude is the difference between an ordeal and an adventure. So that actually got me through a lot of preseason basketball workouts, but I think it's something that I've chosen to live by. You can either be defeated by, your environment, or you can choose to look at it and let it make you better.
The biggest takeaway I got from hearing all three of you, being very deliberate and active with everything you're doing. Because you're a sport management major or you want to work in sports isn't going to cut it. There's so many out there that do that. You're not entitled to opportunities just from that. Go out and get active relationships, experience, niche skills to make your story the best story possible. That's what I heard from today. So thank you guys so much. We appreciate you. Danielle, John, Roger, and I know had a blast developing this through Sports Biz Camps. Check out the 4th installment, which I think will be next week or a week later, maximizing internship experience. So now we got you right up into the internship. Now you're in that internship or that part-time, that volunteer experience. How do you maximize that? That will be the conversation for next round. But John, Danielle, Roger, again, thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Good to see everyone.
Take care.
Take care, guys.